So in this video, I'm going to walk you through how I used paid advertising and a sprinkling of AI to scale my marketing agency to over $200,000 a month and over 50 active clients. Okay, I'm going to walk you through the context, the proof, the entire funnel that we used, the marketing down to literally the exact winning ad that we had. I'm going to give you the transcript of that ad. I'm going to show you the funnel that we used, the AI tools that we used, the full pre-call sales process, the actual sales process, and the fulfillment that allowed us to keep those clients and charge more and more the longer that we kept them. Okay, if you don't know who I am, my name is George. I'm the founder of Paid House, and I am just documenting my journey essentially to $1 million a month using paid ads, running my agencies. So let's jump in. Start with a bit of context. Okay, so I started Paid House in September of 2022, back when the agency market was hot, right? And it was cool to run an e-com agency, and now everyone's doing AI stuff. But anyway, I processed my first $700 payment. So I obviously initially thought that I was rich and I had made it. And then obviously it's scaled up from there. Between 2022 and sort of 2024, we were a Google Ads agency exclusively for e-commerce brands. Okay, so that was kind of the niche that we operated in. We had one service for one avatar. Okay, the standard stuff. Rebranded in Jan 2024 to become the paid search company. So that was kind of the name of the agency. And the reason for that is because obviously we were running Google Ads. And then finally in Jan 2025, we rebranded to Paid House, which is maybe the name that you may recognize if you've been following me on any platforms. And the reason we did that is because we wanted to introduce other services to sell to our clients. Okay, at our peak, we were a 25-person full-time remote team. We had a paid ads department, we had an email marketing department, we had a CRO department, a creative department, a small sales team, and then an operations team. Okay, so proof. Now, it took 2 years to get to $50,000 a month in revenue, okay? From the point of starting all the way to October of 2024. Now, the reason for that is because I was relying solely on organic methods, okay? I was pretty much posting, I think 5 times a day on X, at some point Twitter, and that was where pretty much all my clients came from. I was doing a little bit of YouTube on the side, but I was slaving away. I was making lead magnets, giveaways, posts, videos, like I was grinding, okay? And $50,000 a month is not a bad outcome, sure, but I got into the business game to make a lot more money than that. I mean, after you less all of your expenses and everything like that, you're probably left with 20, 30K USD net. After taxes, it's a long day, as we say here in the UK. So yeah, I essentially knew kind of something had to change if I wanted to get to the next level. And then at that point, I kind of had a friend who was running meta ads, and I kind of was interested in that. So I paid someone to teach me how to run meta ads. They didn't do a great job, but I learned the basics, and I kind of did a bit of research and iterated on the process from there. And eventually I was able to scale to 160K a month in Jan 2025. So we went from 50 to 160, we 3x'd, okay? Now, look, this is not the biggest agency in the world. There's people running agencies that do 500K a month, $1 million a month. I get it. But it's more about the rate of growth that we were able to achieve, which is pretty impressive. And then from that point on, I doubled down, and from Jan to November, we did 1.2 mil. We had a 30K day in there, 200K was our best month, and we did this at 50 to 60% margins, okay? Now, this was all without posting content, okay? I think I maybe did a couple of tweets and tops 4 YouTube videos in that entire time frame, which if you know about anything about content is absolutely nothing. And no cold email whatsoever, very few referrals, I'm gonna be honest. It was never a big lead generation source for this business, and not really any partnerships either. So it literally was 99% ads. And even coming into the year, you might say, oh, but didn't you bring a load of existing clients that made all this revenue? I can genuinely hand on heart say that over 80% of this revenue was all through new clients that we started acquiring when we switched on ads here. Okay, a lot of the old clients, by that point had churned out the business, okay? So that is the proof. Now let me literally just pull back the curtain and give you everything, okay? So this is the full funnel. And the reason I'm making this video and telling you this is because I see so many agencies that are, quite frankly, lost. They are, on the content hamster wheel. They're shooting cold emails out left, right, and center. And essentially what that kind of gets you is, this sort of unpredictability where you've got revenue on the left here, you've got time on the bottom axis, on the x-axis, and you kind of make a bit of money, and then sort of your content doesn't do as well 1 month, and your cold emails don't, or you get less referrals, so you go down and you go up a little bit. There's no predictability because you don't have a system where you can put sort of $1 in and get $3 out. And that is exactly what paid ads gives you. I was in full control pretty much of my growth. The only reason we didn't scale further is because of hard capacity constraints. When you're operating in the e-com niche, it's a pretty difficult niche to fulfill on. And so you can't just like mega scale. It's not like an info product. You actually have to hire really good people, and that takes a lot of time. So that's a whole nother story. But anyway, let's jump back into the funnel. So, hopefully I've given you a reason why you should continue watching this video and actually see this through to the end, because you have to build this funnel. If you want to enjoy your life running an agency, and if you actually want to scale to 100K a month, 200K a month, 500K a month and beyond. Okay, I've never been there, but I have friends who have, and they literally all use this funnel. All right. So you've got three components: marketing, sales, and fulfillment. Now with marketing, you have your creatives. Okay. So we're running ads here on Meta. The reason we're running ads on Meta is because it is the best platform to run ads on. I've had so many people say, oh, should I run ads on X or, LinkedIn or Pinterest? It's like, no. Okay. Meta is one of the world's most valuable companies. I'm pretty sure it's got the most advertising spend on it out of any single company in the world. And because of that, and because it's been around for so long, it has the most sophisticated targeting algorithm out there, okay? So it will be able to find your ideal customer better than any other platform can, okay? Because it just has better data with how people use Instagram and Facebook, again, than any other platform, okay? Now, of course, Google, YouTube, you may have heard that, of those platforms in terms of, people advertising on them. It's a close second, sure. But if you genuinely just want to be able to succeed with ads at also a relatively low budget, I promise you, Meta is the place to start, okay? So on Meta, we're running a few different types of creatives, okay? I'll make future videos on this channel in terms of the actual specific types of creatives that are working right now, but I'm gonna break down one of my creatives in a second here, which was a talking head ad, okay? And for me, 70% of my creatives were all talking head ads, okay, because they just converted the best. So we're making a variety of creatives. We're running those creatives in the ad account. We're driving that traffic to a simple landing page, okay, which is going to have a VSL, or it may not even not have a VSL whatsoever, which again, I'll show you what that looks like in a second. I'll literally show you the funnel that we used. On that landing page, we then have qualification. So Typeform is going to pop up when people book a call, and this is your sort of guardian angel. This is your shield against stupid people, because a lot of unqualified traffic will initially come through your funnel as Meta optimizes to try and find the right person that your ad is targeting, that you're trying to get on a call with you. Okay, by the way, all of this is assuming that you are selling, as most agencies do, sort of $2,000 to $5,000 product, or maybe, it can be more than that, a $10,000 product, whatever. It can be all the way up to like 20, 30K, but you're selling a high ticket productized service, okay? That is really what this system is effective for. And, I may go through some of this in a later video, but if you do not have a very productized service, i.e., where you have a very, very clear customer journey that people go through on a regular basis, then this is going to get you clients for sure, but it's going to get you a lot of headaches as well, because every single client's going to be going through a different process, and there's going to be issues. It's going to be hard to delegate, etc. But I digress. So we're using this Typeform, and this is something that I see a lot of agencies and coaches and all these other people advertising their services running without, to prevent unqualified prospects from booking, okay? Because when someone books a call, what you're gonna wanna have is a pixel, right? Obviously, if you're running ads, you need a pixel. And again, I'm gonna make videos going through technical aspects of that, but you're essentially gonna wanna have a pixel with a specific conversion action. Okay, in our case, we want people to schedule a call. So that's gonna be a schedule action. And that action is gonna fire once people book a call and they land on a specific thank you page. Now, what that does is it trains the pixel to then go after more people like that, because Meta's like, oh great, this type of person does this action, let's go find more of that kind of person to make the advertiser, i.e. you or me, happy, so they spend more money with us. That's their entire business model. And so if we're just letting any old guy book a call, Meta's just gonna go haywire. And the fundamental reality of the world is that there are more poor people than there are rich people, okay? And so if you're letting poor people in, or unqualified people in, we can substitute poor with unqualified, it kind of means the same thing in pretty much any industry, then you're gonna get way more of those people, because it's easier for Meta to find and go after those people. And that, my friends, is how you destroy your chances of ever seeing success with paid ads, okay? But probably more on that on another video. So we wanna have a Typeform where we're asking questions like, what's your monthly recurring revenue, okay? Again, whether you're advertising to e-commerce, SaaS, dentists, lawyers, I don't care, right? Whatever niche you're in, fundamental rule is you're probably going to try and advertise to at least the top 10% of that niche, because those are the people that have the money to buy your offer. And so we essentially want to just obviously target those people. So we are asking revenue, we are asking obviously, we're obviously asking for name, email, phone number, that's really important. Then we're asking for things like revenue. Again, depending on your service, you may ask things like, what's your current ad spend? We're just trying to qualify. And you may think, oh, but that's adding loads of friction. It's like, yes, exactly. We want to add friction so that we only get qualified people on the call. Because another thing is a lot of people think cost per call is an important metric when it comes to ads. It's not. The only important metric is your return on ad spend. Okay, so you're putting $1,000 in a month, you're getting $3,000 out, all right? And that has nothing to do with your cost per call. You could literally have $1,000 cost per call, so that entire ad spend gets you one call. But if that person buys because they're hyper qualified, then you've had a great outcome, okay? So anyway, we are blocking unqualified traffic, okay? At this point, you can sell them a low ticket product, you can refer them, okay? I don't think there's going to be a huge amount of success here. We've never really seen success from doing this because these guys are just not really buyers. But that's what you're going to do. And then you're going to actually have qualified traffic go through, book a call. Okay, so the call happens here. You can have a separate page for this, but we actually embed our Calendly on the type form. And then at this point, they are going to go ahead and hit a thank you page with FAQ videos and other trust building assets. Now, this is when we get into pre-call, what I call pre-call propaganda. Okay, now pre-call propaganda is super important because in this day and age, trust is low. And there are a lot of people advertising offers. Furthermore, you need to understand the difference between warm and cold traffic, right? You may be, if you're watching this and you're not running ads, selling to warm traffic, and that's people who book, calls through content, who come through referrals, etc. These people, they know, like, and trust you, okay? And so their behavior is going to be very different from cold traffic. And what I mean by that is warm traffic is going to remember that the fact they booked a call with you, they're going to respect your time, they're going to show up, and they're going to conduct themselves in a professional way on the call. Cold traffic could not be anything less than that. Because cold traffic, you are irrelevant to cold traffic. You are interrupting their day, right? Again, if you think about the market, let's say this is your market. It's a bit of a wonky, meant to be a pie chart. It's a little bit bad. No matter how much of a celebrity you are in your market, this is the amount of cold traffic there is, and this is the amount of warm traffic there is. You could literally have 1 million followers or 10,000, and this is always going to be it's always going to be true. It's just the sliver's going to be slightly bigger or slightly smaller, depending on how many people you have following you, etc. And so what you realize here is, like, if you just depend on warm traffic, you're never really going to be able to scale to huge multiples and huge numbers, because there's just not enough people to literally advertise to. It just becomes impossible. But with cold traffic, there is essentially infinite amount of people. All of these people here, everyone in this bigger section here, okay? The problem is that cold traffic don't care about you, right? This lovely warm slice of the pie here, they pretty much love you, okay? And they're going to be really nice to you, but this side of the pie, they don't care about you. You're interrupting their scrolling session, and they don't care, okay? And so even if they do book a call, they're going to pretty much just forget, and the amount of intent, right, that they have is literally at its highest when they book the call. And then, if this is time, it goes down and down and down and down every single second and minute after. And so what we need to do is we need to make it absolutely certain that they remember who we are. Okay. And we do that by sending multiple emails per day, up to 15 emails before they actually get on the call. We want to send selfie videos. We want to send looms. We want to do content remarketing. We want to text them a link to the call. We want to text them reminders about the call, potentially even, and this is something that we implemented and worked really well, actually calling prospects that book a call up before the call, so we can just go through some preliminary qualification and actually handle some objections, plus just remind them who we are again. And then also sending out blue iMessages / WhatsApps from the closer, whether that's you or a person on your sales team. If you do all of that correctly, and again, there's levels to this, which I'll have to go into in other videos to make sure this isn't 3 hours long, you're going to get very high show rates. We had between 70 to 80% show rates, okay, on our offer. And again, this is in e-commerce, which is super hard because we're dealing with extremely market sophisticated people, all right? You pretty much have two types of people in the agency space in terms of niches and customers. They're either sophisticated or they're unsophisticated. So if you're selling to a plumber or a roofer, they are an unsophisticated individual in terms of marketing. And so they're a lot more receptive to marketing tactics because, in their head, they're not like, oh, this is a marketing tactic, right? Whereas, agency owners like myself and e-commerce owners and software business owners, like these guys are very sophisticated people. They understand marketing. They literally have to be successful. And so they are going to be very, very, very resistant to a lot of these tactics. And that's why we have to just up our ante essentially if we want to make it work. So we've got to do all of these things. And we've then obviously got to make sure that the following metrics are true, okay? But I guess one thing that, I haven't really articulated here is the importance of the offer, right? Because it's really the offer that is fueling this entire thing. And the quality of your offer is literally going to determine the quality of everything else. I know you've heard it before, you've read $100 million offers, I get it. I'm not going to go into depth about that, but you just need to ensure that the offer that you're presenting is an offer that your market actually wants. And it's also using the language that they essentially speak. And it's focused on outcomes and benefits, not about your service. So if you run an ad saying, oh, I sell Google ads, do you want Google ads by now? It's not going to be effective. But if you run an ad saying, hey, do you want a 4x ROAS? And then it just so happens that Google ads is your mechanism for getting them that result, that will be a better outcome. Again, this is in the e-commerce industry, but you can extrapolate that to whatever niche you're in. So that is going to preface all of this. But anyway, once we've got them to show up, we were typically seeing 80% show rates, 80% offer rates, 40 to 60% close rates on live calls. And then we really want a day one AOV of 4K plus. Obviously, the higher the better, right? But typically these were the ranges that we were seeing. So a lot of people make a mistake and they try and run ads like a software business where you're essentially selling something as cheap as 2 to 3K on the front end. Okay, and of course, anything can work when it comes to unit economics. Like if you get a $1,000 CAC on a 2K offer, then you've made a 2x ROAS, and that's a pretty good outcome. But I can just tell you for a fact, it's very unlikely that you're going to have a $1,000 CAC because there's just certain things in the market, cost per impressions and cost per clicks are just at a certain level because of just general competition in the market, that it's just very hard to achieve a CAC in the hundreds of dollars. And it's much more likely that you're going to have a CAC in the thousands of dollars. And so if you're, for example, the industry average CAC, I think is probably around $2,000. Okay. And our CAC, for example, was anywhere between $2,000 and $3,000. Okay. And so if you're breaking even on the front end, this is a problem, in my opinion, because then you do not have excess profit to reinvest back into acquiring more clients. Okay, and this is a concept called client financed acquisition, which we're going to cover later. But essentially, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you engineer an offer where you have a high day one AOV that is at least 2x your CAC, at least. Okay, and what that may look like is if you charge X for 1 month, the offer is a 3-month offer. And that's probably going to give you more time to upsell and do all those things anyway. One of the mistakes we made is we ran a 1-month offer. So we were charging $3K because we typically charge $3,000 a month in this agency. And it was so hard because our CAC was 2K and then obviously we had to pay all of our people to deliver that service. And even though it was productized, it was kind of breaking even. And so then we pivoted to selling something that was sort of 6K on the front end, and we just did way better. Okay. And we were just able to scale way more aggressively because we had a much better ROAS. So that is, in my opinion, how you should go about things. I think some people will argue that you should be breaking even and just exposing yourself to more customers. I think, again, if you're a software business, if you have a lot of cash in the bank, or if you're just trying to go very much mass market, that's a valid strategy. But if you're actually just trying to make money and make profit, like a lot of you watching this video, I would not recommend that. Okay, so there we go. Then once we're closing these people, we then obviously enter into the fulfillment frame. And so then we want to go through onboarding, we want to go through fulfillment, we want to achieve a sub 10% monthly churn. We want to be using a one-to-one account manager model so that this is actually scalable. If you're involved in any aspect of the client delivery, there's going to be a problem, I would say. I think it's probably valid to try and keep yourself on maybe one top client. There's definitely an argument for that. But then we want to make sure that pretty much everyone who comes through this productized offer is getting fulfilled by a specific account manager so that it's scalable. Otherwise, you're just going to run ads for a month and then run out of capacity. We want to be achieving, in my opinion, an LTV of 20 to 30K and above, of course. Because as I said, if the industry average CAC is 2 to 3K, then we're going to be able to get a 10x ROAS on revenue. And if you have a 50% profit margin, then we're going to be able to get a 5x LTGP, so CAC to LTGP, right? So you're paying for 5x your profit. Essentially, you're getting a 5x profit on ad spend over the course of however long it takes you to realize this LTV, which for us was about 10 months. Okay, we had about a 30K client LTV. We had a 10%. Well, it was a little bit higher than 10%, but 10 to 15% monthly churn rate. And so we were keeping clients roughly for, 7, 8, 9, 10 months, okay, from this specific productized offer. People who came through other avenues would stay a lot longer, but anyway. And then from the clients that were closing on here, we had a 33% upsell rate. So 1 in 3 people who bought this offer would then buy another offer of ours, right? So like email marketing, for example, okay? And then we were able to redistribute that profit back into here and keep spending more to the point where we were spending, 30K a month plus, okay? Doesn't sound like a lot for certain businesses, e-com businesses, info businesses, I get it. But for agencies, especially agencies that actually deliver a high complexity done for you service, which a lot of these gurus, they've never experienced that is quite a lot because you have to hire to keep up with that. So now we covered the funnel, let's jump into the marketing, okay? So I'm just gonna give you our best ad. We literally had this ad here, and as you can see, over the course of December to December, we spent probably about, 60,000 US on that. And we scheduled 132 sales calls from that. In fact, I think we scheduled like way more than that because Meta is just terrible at tracking sometimes. And so, we scheduled a total of over 700 calls in that time frame as well, just for context. But nonetheless, I digress. This was our best ad. And to be honest with you, I can't completely understand why it was our best ad because if I actually show you that ad, and I'll probably link down below in the description and I'll just give you like the ad in like a drive folder or something. But it was really bad editing and really bad lighting and a bad like mic setup. It was just terrible. Like the ad was terrible. I'll be the first to say that. In fact, it was one of my first ads in this entire account. But for some reason, it just crushed, okay? And I have a few kind of hypotheses as to why, but nonetheless, this was the transcript, okay? And again, this is targeting e-commerce businesses, but whatever niche you're in, we can like the fundamentals of a good ad script are true here. So what if you could get a 4x ROAS on cold traffic without even touching Meta ads? So what this means is, what if you could get a 4x return on your ad spend on cold traffic without even touching Meta ads? Now, I was selling a Google Ads service, so the point of this was to essentially like vilify Meta ads and deify Google Ads, which is a complex way of saying like, Meta ads is the enemy, Google Ads is the way you should go. Most e-commerce brands are running Meta ads, not Google Ads, right? So anyway, I've worked with over 100 different brands with an average ROAS of 5.6x using Google Ads. So what we have here is a hook, okay? And a hook is gonna be the first 1 to 3 seconds. Then we have an authority statement, okay? So why they should continue listening to you. I think that's really important to have. No, this does not include branded search. So I basically instantly handle an objection. So without getting too complex, branded search is like a bad practice for running Google Ads in some cases. So we basically handle an objection straight out the gate. And we've basically analyzed hundreds of our sales calls before this to generate and find these objections. And I highly recommend you do this, by the way. If you're not using like a AI meeting note taker, you're crazy. But go find all of your sales calls, download transcripts, throw it into an AI model, and ask it to find your most common objections. And we want to handle those objections in the ads, in the VSL, in the email sequences. We want to handle the biggest objections before they get on the call so that we can essentially turn ourselves as closers or our sales team into cashiers where we're just taking money because all of the objections have already been handled. That is the best way to get a high return on your ad spend, okay? Completely cold traffic, top of funnel new customers. Again, this is kind of like an objection handle. And then we have the offer, okay? So I like getting into a direct offer very quickly because it's a good idea. It just doesn't waste any time. In fact, sometimes you even, I think since, to be honest, doing this ad, I think the market's even evolved to where like, you probably just want to put the offer in like the second line because people have such short attention spans. They just want to hear what it is that you have to offer. Like, especially if you're doing this talking head ad, like people know it's an ad. So they just kind of want you to get to the point, right? And I think a lot of agency ads don't do that. They just kind of like, fumble around and it kind of sounds like a software ad or something. It's like with cold traffic, you have to be so clear. It's like, we will do this for you on a done for you basis. And then you sort of talk about the deliverables here. And then you essentially want to give, some kind of benefit. Okay. So why, or rather I'd say a unique mechanism. So why are you different from the rest? So at this point I was saying, I will run the ads for you. Even though I had a team at this point, that's just what I said in the ad. And then obviously you want to have some case studies. And then you want to kind of restate the offer with a bit of urgency, right? Plus urgency. And then you kind of have this really long CTA section here, which again, I don't think is necessarily a best practice, but it just worked for this ad, right? So if you want the entire setup in your account, all for a one-time payment, then click the Learn More button below. So this was back when we were doing the 1 month offer, and it was literally like a one-time payment. We would set up the Google Ads account for them. It would last 30 days, and then we would try and get them to continue from there. Obviously, as I said, it was not the best offer in terms of unit economics for that reason. Like, we didn't have the highest LTV on it, so that's why we switched to a 3-month offer. But anyway, that's the CTA. Essentially, click Learn More, input your information. After you're done watching, you can book a call with me. And then I really specified, you have to be doing 30K a month or more. And I think that could be a reason why this ad did so well in terms of ROAS, is because, we really emphasized the 30K a month or more in the type form, on the landing page, on here as well. And so it meant that only people that had money were getting on the call, and they were buying. In retrospect, even though this sounds crazy, I would probably go back and just try and target people doing 100K a month. Like, your cost per call will be way higher. The higher you go when you're trying to sort of ask people or mandate revenue requirements because of this. Like, there's just less people at the top. However, those people are way more likely to buy. So in doing so, your cost per call will go up, but your CAC will go down and your ROAS will go up. Okay, so it's a bit counterintuitive, but if I was to do this again, I would do that. And then in terms of the actual funnel that we sent them to, this was the funnel. So I'll just click on it here and show you, and I'll copy the links to this below. So we call out the ICP, we'll run your Google Ads for 30 days. There's a VSL here where we explain the offer, get started now, and then, case study, proof, problems, solutions, how the process works, testimonials, another call to action, and then some FAQs. To be honest with you, you can even do way shorter than this. Honestly, most people don't scroll below the header. So really the headline, the subheading, the VSL, and the ICP call out and the button are the most important things, okay? You can actually realize a small issue with this funnel. It's very good to have the button above the fold, so people don't have to scroll to see it. That's gonna massively increase your CTR. So that's a bit of a mistake on this funnel here, but nonetheless, this funnel has made us hundreds of thousands of dollars, like a lot of money. So yeah. And then obviously once you click on the button, you're basically going to get pulled through into an application page, okay? And so this is where, you're doing this type form thing that I mentioned over here, okay? And then once you successfully get through that, you then reach a thank you page, which we'll show in a second, okay? Now, in terms of the AI component of this, I used AI to essentially script every single one of my ads that I ever ran. An AI tool that I really like is poppy.ai, okay? And as you can see here, I have a project where I would essentially give context. I would give a mission and a role to the AI. I would give a bunch of different examples in terms of, just good ad practices, like how to write good ads. I would then throw in a winning ad of ours, which is the winning ad that I just talked about. And then some market research and stuff like that I would throw in. And basically Poppy allows you to sort of drag all of this all these resources into an AI agent so that it learns off of it, and then it can just spit out ads. Okay, so honestly, one of my favorite AI tools. It allows you to make a lot of ads very, very quickly. Okay, we also tested things like 11 Labs, which is essentially like AI UGC, or it does like AI voiceovers, and then Manus. Okay, another really good tool for writing content. Okay, and then also Claude as well, very good for kind of rounding off content. Not quite as high quality because it's not like credit-based. Credit-based AI tools are almost always better than just sort of tools that you pay for on a monthly basis, but it was still useful for high volume stuff. And again, when you're like, this might not apply to a lot of you, but when you get to a level where you're spending $500 a day, $1,000 a day, you need a lot of creatives. You know, if you're spending $500 a day, you probably need 8 to 12 new creatives a month. If you're spending $1,000 a day, you probably need like 20 new creatives a month, right? It's 5 a week. It's quite a lot. Anyway, at this point, we've booked a call. The customer has gone successfully through the funnel and they've booked a call. So here are a couple of things that we're doing. Now, first things first, we're sending an iMessage, a blue iMessage from our salesperson to the person that booked the call, because obviously we captured their details in this type form here. This is really good. A lot of people replied to this, okay? Like 33 to 50% of people would reply to this. And then our close was actually able to have a dialogue with them before the call and just kind of see if there were any initial objections, okay? After they booked a call, they would land on this thank you page here. And this video basically just sort of kind of explained what this page was, because on this page we then had some FAQ videos where we were again handling these specific objections. Okay, so it's so important. Like, you need to understand what your objections are and you need to handle them before the call. It's just going to massively increase your close rates, okay, and build a lot of trust. But then we're also asking like, hey, make sure you take the call in a quiet place, like all of those things that are important for closing. And then the main CTA is actually to get them to confirm the meeting on Google Calendar so that we actually know that they're showing up. Because 9 times out of 10, if they confirm on Google Calendar, it's very likely that they're going to show up, okay? So that's that. And then we have an automation here to where once they actually go ahead and book the call, we're then going to add them to our email sequence, which I was mentioning earlier, which has somewhere between 7 to 15. I think ours had like closer to 7 emails, which we're sending out to them. It's going to also send a message to our Slack channel, obviously, which is notifying the sales rep. It's going to create a lead in Close, which is our CRM. You might use GHL, Monday CRM, whatever. It's all the same. And then we're adding it to our sales tracking sheet as well. Okay. And so then we have this email sequence here where we're then immediately sending them emails. And as you can see, it's literally like 3 a day. Okay. Which sounds like overkill, but I promise you, you need to handle their objections, instill your propaganda into them, whatever it is, and you need to really understand what your propaganda is, okay? So for us, it was all about like, hey, Google Ads perform way better than Meta Ads, okay? And that was really just what we were trying to get across before the call. And then we had a sales presentation, and obviously, look, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm a sales expert. I'm very much more on the marketing side of things, but it's my belief that if you have fantastic marketing, sales becomes easy. This very controversial statement, I know, but I genuinely think sales is just a function of marketing. Like if you kill it on the marketing side, you're targeting the right person, you're handling their objections before the call, you're making sure you only allow people with money to book, like you can get like a B-level sales rep to close that call. It's only when you're really trying to ram a square peg into a circle hole that you need a great sales rep, to be honest with you. Obviously a great sales rep is going to improve things, but that's just my thoughts on the matter. Now, so yeah, there's nothing revolutionary here in terms of our sales process. We would build rapport, we would take them through discovery, ask them questions, we would pitch with slides. Slides are useful in cold traffic, in my opinion, just it's a bit more professional, a bit more visual, right? All these things. Answer questions, handle objections, close, add them into Slack there and then on the call, take the payment, send them the link to the onboarding form in the Slack channel or via email. And then once the call is completed, the closer would fill out a conversion form, okay? So this was a huge part of our operation because we were closing people into a lot of different kinds of things and they had a lot of different needs. They were in a different niche every single time because we were in e-com, which isn't really a niche, it's an industry. And so we had a lot of data to capture after the sale had happened. And the conversion form was so important. It was kind of like the handshake between sales and fulfillment, okay? So that fulfillment could get all the context that they needed to then go and take this new client and fulfill it, okay? And so this was the automation that the conversion form would set off. So we would essentially create a new spreadsheet in a new row in our sort of client dashboard with all of our data. We would send a message in Slack. We would invite the client to Slack. We would update the opportunity and close, and then we would create an Asana project so that the fulfillment team had all of their tasks set out to then go about completing, okay? Now, it's really important that you, as I said earlier, get a very good idea of what your customer journey is. And this is why I think it's so important to really just sell one offer on the front end. Like sometimes it's tempting to sell a lot of different things, but like it's so hard to get one offer really, really good that it's just pointless to start selling other stuff. Like that's a mistake we made. We were trying to sell multiple things on the front end. We should really have only ever sold one thing because that way you can just dial in your fulfillment and the process and the customer journey, okay? And that way every single customer goes through the same journey. Everything's very repeatable, very easy for fulfillment to fulfill, right? So, that happened. Then in our project management software, we used Asana. We would get each account manager, which you can see here, would then get set specific tasks based on that automation, which they would then go about completing. And then we also had this sort of traffic light system where we would mark clients as red, yellow, or green, and that was based on their likelihood to churn, okay? And then on top of that, these were, I would say, the 6 essential sort of fulfillment principles that we had that allowed us to have a lot of success with doing this whole ads funnel because, like the ads funnel does not stop when you close the client. It only stops when it doesn't really stop, but it only succeeds when you actually get that client and then deliver them fantastic results to where they stay for 10 months and they have a fantastic LTV and they buy all of your other stuff. Like that is success. And so we needed all of these other things So we needed an onboarding call, which the AM would do. We then needed a weekly client call, which the AM would do, a weekly report to the client about the performance, which the AM would do, a weekly report internally, which is this, so marking them as red, yellow, green, and then giving a report on, the ad spend, the performance, whatever. A weekly team call where we would review all of this and brainstorm ideas. And then on top of that, an end of day report where they would list some of the major changes that they made for all their clients. Like, pretty full on stuff, but that was how we were able to get very good churn rates. You can see here for the majority of the year, we're somewhere between 10 and 15%, which in my opinion, on a done for you productized service is pretty good. Obviously sub 10% is ideal, but 10 to 15%, you can scale with that, okay? On top of that, as I said, we also have this sort of back-end client dashboard where, one really unique thing we were doing is we had a lot of upsell, cross-sell stuff. And that was really, our play, right? We would have a relatively high CAC, probably closer to $3,000 to be honest with you, because we are advertising to quite sophisticated people. But these sophisticated people did have money and they did have a need for a lot of different services. And so we were able to kind of have a pretty monstrous LTV because then, once we sold them on Google, we would try and sell them on Meta, Creative, email, etc. And we were sort of tracking all these different things. I wouldn't recommend having this many services. It was kind of a headache in the end. But if you can have at least one or two really good services that are kind of very logical to then sell after they've closed on the first offer, it's just going to be game changing for your LTV. And as I said, we want sort of 1 in 3 customers to upsell or ascend, as they say, successfully. Okay. So we want to achieve a sub 10% monthly churn. And as I said, 1 in 3, we want upselling. And if we can do that successfully, then what we have is a beautiful system where fulfillment produces, you essentially have a money printer, right? If you can do this, you have a money printer, right? To a certain extent. Obviously, if you scale ad spend too much, you do get diminishing returns, but like it's pretty far. Like I know companies doing $5 million a month with this exact funnel, $5 million a month with this exact funnel. Yeah, this is pretty much it. There's obviously loads of other stuff that I want to dive into on this channel. But hopefully if you've gotten this far, this has been valuable. I'm going to leave links to a bunch of these resources that I've covered today in the description. Subscribe. That's my only ask for you because I kind of want this channel to essentially just be very high level agency content about how to scale with ads, which is really the only thing you need to be focusing on once you're past 30K a month. It's just scaling with ads, hiring salespeople and building out new service lines. That is the most important thing. So if you're here for that, if you like that idea, then subscribe. And I'm going to hopefully be posting relatively high volume content on this channel, kind of documenting my journey with this whole thing moving forward. So thank you very much for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.